everybody! How's your year been going so far? Anything fun I've missed out on? Yeah. So, remember Revenge of the Nerds? It was a big movie in the 80s. It was iconic for a lot of people. For those of you who don't remember, we'll go through it real quick. It is a group of nerds goes to college, and they all believe this is our time to shine. We're not going to get picked on for being nerds anymore because college is where intellectuals are valued. And instead they get to college and it's filled with jocks who make their lives a living hell. So they form their own fraternity and get revenge of the nerds. It's right there in the title. And they become the big men on campus. Along the way, this movie didn't age well. Because you go back and you look at it now, it's remembered fondly because it was, the underdogs, the outsiders standing up, and that kind of thing will always resonate with somebody. There are always people who think of themselves as the outsiders or the underdogs and like to see people that they feel are representative of them succeed. Always going to be the case. In this case, though, one of the memorable scenes of the movie is when the nerds hide hidden cameras in a girl's sorority so that they can see them naked. And as an 80s raunchy comedy, that's not that unusual. But looking at it with today's eyes, it's a little strange that these are our heroes that we're supposed to be in favor of. That we're supposed to be like, yeah! You get 'em, boy! Even worse. The main character, the main nerd in the series is Lewis. He will show up in this one again. Lewis is in love with Betty, who is the prettiest girl in school, and is, of course, the girlfriend of the main jock. There is a scene near the end of the movie where they are at some kind of big fair, and they're in a space-themed funhouse of some kind. Betty goes in there, and a man in a full NASA astronaut getup approaches her, and she thinks it's her boyfriend, and she says, "Is that you?" And whatever the boyfriend's name is, I can't remember. He's not that memorable. And Lewis, who's the nerd, who's in the outfit, nods his head yes, pretending to be her boyfriend. The two of them then have sex with the helmet on. This is called rape. It's what we call it when you trick somebody into having sex with you. It's rape. And apparently Lewis is so good at sex. And the explanation that's given is nerds spend so much time thinking about it that they're secretly amazing at it, that even when his identity is revealed, she doesn't freak out. Instead, she dumps her boyfriend and gets with Lewis. He rapes her till she loves him. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to let that one go. Again, that's our hero. We're supposed to vote for him. But we are not here, believe it or not, to talk about Revenge of the Nerds. Because they made a sequel. So, we've got a decent-sized cast of characters in this movie, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, which is something I don't normally do, but I also don't normally talk about sequels without talking about the original. And since you guys didn't see the original, at least for the purposes of this review, you don't have to have seen the original, so you haven't spent time with these characters and had character growth and gotten to know them, so I'm going to do a quick introduction just so you know who's who. This is Lewis. He's the head nerd. He's the one that raped Betty in the previous movie, and they're living happily ever after. He is a computer science nerd. This is best friend, we'll call him. He is Lewis's best friend who barely appears in this movie, so I'm not going to bother trying to get you to remember his name. He is also a computer science nerd. This is Wormser. He's a very young nerd. Got into college when he was still like 12. He's like starting puberty in the first movie. He's a master of creating fake IDs. So, a little computer science-y, but mostly just he makes fake IDs. This is Poindexter. He is an encyclopedic nerd who also speaks pretty much every known language. At some point in the future, he's going to get laser eye surgery to get rid of those super thick glasses, get into journalism, and become a White House correspondent by the name of Danny Kincannon. This is Lamar. He's the gay black nerd? I mean, yes, hooray for inclusion. Always, I'm not going to argue that there's no need to... Yes, if you include minorities, great. And you got 2 minorities out of the way in one character, good job. But I'm not sure why a gay fashionista is considered a nerd. It doesn't quite fit into the theme. And yet it's still better than Booger. I got a couple problems with Booger. Even though Booger is one of the most iconic characters of the series, the actor himself has said he can't walk down the street without getting yelled, "Hey, Booger," at least once a day. Today. 30 years, 40 years after the movie came out? So, yeah, iconic character. But he's just a gross person who's obsessed with oogling and objectifying women. He's not smart. He's not talented. He's not versed or interested in any topic that's not being gross or objectifying women. Even the actor has stated that Booger is not a nerd at all. He's just a guy that no other group would tolerate, and nerds are very inclusive. That's why Booger and Lamar are in the nerd group. They're not really nerds, but nerds have more of a tendency to accept everybody. I like that message. But, I can go the rest of this... In fact, I will. I will go the rest of this movie review without ever mentioning Booger again. And you won't even notice. He contributes so little to the plot. Lamar and Wormser don't really contribute much to the plot either, but what the hell. Anyway, I think that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and get on with the movie, which is why you're here. We open with a Star Wars crawl, briefly describing the events of the first movie, because of course we do. We're informed that the Tri-Lambs, and I don't know if I'll slip that term in again, but the nerds, fraternity that they joined is Lambda, 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 so they're called the Tri-Lambs. The Tri-Lambs have been appointed by their university to represent that university at a big fraternity conference in Florida. So, nerds are going to the beach! We open with a sequence of nerds packing up for the big trip, except for Best Friend, who's got a broken leg, which means he can't get on a plane? In reality, I'm pretty sure the actor's just thinking about that sweet gig he's got coming up on ER, because there are 2 more movies in this series, and he does not return for either of them, and he barely returned for this one.
How you feeling?
Well, actually, I'm feeling pretty stupid.
Why?
I think I'm the only guy in the world who could break his leg playing chess.
Hey, don't get down on yourself, Gilbert. That was a very tricky move.
Okay. That's a pretty good line. Lewis and friends catch a ride with Lewis's dad, who is Zephram Cochrane. I don't even have anything else to say here. I just want to point out that Zephram Cochrane is in this movie. Briefly. And we get our opening credits while staring at women in bikinis in Florida. This should give you a good idea of the tone of the movie. We then get a brief introduction to 2 of our new main characters for this movie, Girl and New Nerd, both of whom work at the hotel. Okay, so one of the ongoing jokes about Danny Kincannon is that he's blind as a bat. And I've never understood this particular trope. The trope about having the absurdly thick glasses, but you can't see anything, right? Because surely the point of having absurdly thick glasses is so that you can see. If you can't see with the super thick glasses, why are you wearing glasses at all? And if you... what the trope should be is a person who needs glasses but refuses to wear them. because Danny Kincannon is literally wearing the solution to his problem on his face. Meanwhile, back at the check-in, Lewis is instantly smitten by girl. He stumbles over his words and then instantly announces, I have a girlfriend. He neglects to mention that he got this girlfriend by raping her, but perhaps that's something you wait until like the third or fourth sentence to mention. While he hits on girl, he also teaches her how to properly type on a computer because she couldn't figure out how to type. The fact that she doesn't know how to type on a computer, we'll come back to later on in the movie. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and spoil some of the plot for you here. She's the romantic interest of this movie. She's the romantic interest for Lewis. The entire first movie, not the main point, but a primary plot point that ran throughout the movie, was Lewis's desire, rape, and acquisition of Betty. We open this movie seeing that he's still with Betty. He just told us he's still with Betty. And in the third movie, him and Betty are married. I haven't seen the fourth one yet. Don't spoil it for me. I'm excited. So, if one of the main premises of the first movie was, hey, I want to get the girl, and then he gets the girl, why then is one of the romantic plots for the second movie him getting a different girl? There are other nerds. Ideally, best friend, if he had chosen to be in the movie, could have had a romantic plot for that. Even better, though, new nerd who was introduced in this movie could have been hooked up with her, and that actually would have been perfect. Lewis could have offered him advice and helped him woo a pretty girl. Admittedly, said wooing would have been disguise yourself as her boyfriend and rape her under false pretenses until she loves you. But perhaps he would have had some ideas about how to treat a woman other than that, because one of the ideas of Revenge of the Nerds is that nerds treat women better than regular people. They respect them more. They want them. They desire them for so long that they actually think of ways to treat them better. They're nice guys. But then we see Lewis, the instant a pretty girl walks in front of him, basically going, what girlfriend? Yeah, sure, I loved her. Whatever. There's somebody pretty in front of me right now, and he's just as sleazeball as anybody else. And the movie expects us to buy into this romance. We are supposed to be rooting for him to get the girl when he already got the girl. We already did the rooting in the previous movie. He got the girl in the previous movie. And this girl doesn't show up again in the next movie because Lewis is with the girl he wooed. Anyway, the nerds' reservations have been canceled. Girl goes to check with the manager to see why the reservations have been canceled, and it turns out the manager does not want nerds in his hotel. First of all, look at the guy. That guy is 300% a nerd. Second of all, the college already paid for those rooms. Third of all, you've got hundreds of guests staying at your hotel for the purpose of this big fraternity conference. And we've established that your main purpose in life is just to make women uncomfortable. That's what this guy does. It's kind of creepy. When did he have time to research each and every guest to make sure none of them were nerds before they checked in? Also, the anti-nerd thing in this movie, it's part of the whole Revenge of the Nerds universe. Like, it runs throughout, and it's very strange. Like, I get being picked on in high school. I do. I get having a hard time in college. I get not being successful with women. But it's so pervasive in this universe that cops pull nerds over. Like, there's a nerd driving that car. Pull him over for no reason. Nerds. You know, I won't have nerds staying in my hotel. It's so extreme in this universe that in the first movie, when the group of nerds goes to an all-black fraternity, which is what Lambda 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 is, it's an all-black nationwide fraternity, they go up to him and say, nobody else will let us join their fraternity. You guys are black, so you know what it's like to be persecuted like we are. The black people look at this group of white nerds and Lamar and say, you know what, you're right, and accept them. The persecution of nerds is so extreme in this setting that black people go, yeah, man, you got it tough. Anyway, time to introduce our true villain of the movie, Joshua Lyman. Evil, nerd-hating Joshua Lyman. After extensive searching, the nerds find the only empty hotel left in town. And of course, it's the most rundown and terrifying hotel possible. How such a hotel manages to be so horrible and so empty in the middle of Party City, Florida, is a mystery to me. Every other hotel in the city is sold out because there is a conference for every college in the United States to send representatives to. And yet nobody checks into Murder Hotel. And Murder Hotel doesn't have the money to keep itself. Let's just go with it. We cut back to Josh Lyman, who is plotting with everybody else how to get rid of the nerds once and for all. His main driving goal, at least here at the beginning, it grows a little near the end, but here at the beginning, is to get these nerds kicked out of the conference. Again, it's a conference with representatives from hundreds of colleges. There is one group of nerds in this conference, and he is going to dedicate all of his time and energy to getting rid of them. Forget about the fact that they are so ridiculously in the minority that you could outvote them on anything. That they're staying at the Murder Hotel. No, I have to crush these nerds utterly. Just having nerds in the same city as them ruins everything. Oh, also, Ogre is back from the first movie as the biggest, dumbest jock. Anyway, the Alpha Betas here come up with a plan to get rid of the nerds. The nerds receive an invitation to a pre-conference barbecue being held in the middle of a jungle. Despite the fact that they are picked on and beat up and tricked their entire lives, at no point do they suspect this is a setup. Repeatedly in this movie, the nerds never conceive of the idea that it's a trick. Any of the things that happen coming up, they never think these guys might be trying. I'm going to share a personal story now. This is a personal story I did not expect to share with the internet, but here we are. I'm not terribly nerdy, but sure. Video games, movies, sure. And I had friends in high school. I didn't get beat up in high school or middle school. I had a strange, eclectic group of friends, but I still do. The point is, I was not the most popular kid in the world. I was not as bad as these people are portrayed. But one day in class, middle school, it's quiet time. Everybody just, read the textbook, read a book, read anything. And I was reading through some book, and I don't remember what it was, but it was just for personal enjoyment. And one of the prettiest girls in the class walks up to me. I don't know this girl. She never had any interest in talking to me before. I didn't particularly care about her. She was quite pretty, though. But, we were not going to be friends, so I never put any effort into it. Anyway, she comes up, puts her hand on my back, leans over, looks at my book, asks me to tell her what my book is about. So I do. And then she turns around and walks back to her seat, and without thinking, without pausing for a moment, I just reach back to where her hand was and peel off the Post-it note that was on my back, kick me, or whatever it said, I don't even remember, and threw it away. Because it was a very strange circumstance for this person who had no interest in me to suddenly, briefly, have an intense interest in what I was doing, including touching me, which is not something that happened a lot in middle school. There's not a lot of just random touching going on. Nobody in this movie can figure out, despite a lifetime of being treated horribly, that somebody might be trying to trick them. And it makes me wonder how smart these nerds actually are. They spot some Native Americans preparing to sacrifice a woman, and being the good-hearted people that they are, they decide to rush to her rescue. Caught by the Native Americans, they are told that they must strip naked or be killed. And still, they don't suspect anything. And can we all just take a moment to enjoy seeing Emmy Award-winning actor Bradley Whitford dressed up as a Native American in Revenge of the Nerds 2, Nerds in Paradise? I hope I can meet him at a convention one day and ask him to sign a photo from this scene. Just as Danny Kincannon realizes that none of the Native Americans actually speak Seminole, a gator scares the nerds and they all bolt out through the Native Americans in their underwear. And that's when we find out that the fancy Aztec palace they've been running around in is part of a dining area for rich weirdos. The next day, the hotel manager continues to be a jerk, including slapping Girl on the ass. When New Nerd speaks up in her defense, he is physically thrown out of the hotel into our nerds, joining their posse. So now the alphas have to come up with a new plan to get rid of the nerds. They introduce a new amendment stating that all fraternities must meet new physical standards in order to participate in the conference. Despite the fact that our nerds used their smarts to win physical Olympic-style events in the previous movie, they now know that they can't compete physically, even though that was literally a plot point from the first movie and they overcame it with their intelligence. So, they have to figure out a way, in the one day they have before that amendment is voted on, to change the minds of all of the fraternities and convince them to vote no. Our nerds decide that the only way to convince the public to vote no is to throw the biggest party possible. I'm not sure how that solves the situation, but okay. So, how do our nerds plan to throw the biggest party in Party City, Florida, in the middle of a fraternity conference where surely there are parties happening everywhere? Not only that, not only do the nerds have to throw the most successful party in town when they're nerds, they have to throw it at the murder hotel, where everybody's afraid to come and nobody's willing to take a room at. How are they going to do this? Well, by changing the sign to say Hotel Oral Sex, of course. That makes everybody in Florida show up. Because, sure, it's a terrifying murder bordello, but I might get a blowjob. And of course, we cap off the party with a big musical number, because that was an iconic moment from the first movie, so we'll just do it again. We'll sing a song about how nerds are people too, and suddenly everybody agrees to vote no on the proposed amendment. At this point, Josh Lyman stands up and it calls out his own team, the Alpha Betas, for how evil it was of them to pick on nerds like they have been. And he proposes a brand new amendment that says any fraternity caught in any illegal activities will be permanently disbanded on the national level. So, one branch of nerds or jocks breaks the law, and all across the nation, that national charter is revoked. And for some reason, unlike the previous amendment, which was required by the bylaws to be announced one day and then voted on the next, for plot purposes, this one can be announced and voted on the same day. So it goes into effect, and the nerds, again, suspect nothing. The Alpha Betas also move the nerds back into their original hotel room. So, I guess, happy ending, right? The nerds have won. They got their revenge. We're halfway through the movie, but I guess it's over. I don't understand this at all. But the scene right after the Alpha Betas go, here's the sweet hotel room you were meant to have. Go for it. The very next scene is Lewis back in the murder hotel using the phone to call his best friend and say how great everything is going and how all the problems are solved. And finally, best friend, who hasn't been there for any of it, says, "They're tricking you, Lewis." But Lewis won't listen. The one guy who's not actually experiencing anything is the only one who can see what the hell's going on. Finally, the Alpha's plan is revealed. The hotel manager assigns 2 women to take the nerds out to party in Josh Lyman's car. These 2 women are told to make sure to get the nerds alone in the car at some point. So it's just the nerds in the car and not the women. Then he grabs Girl off the front desk and says, "You need to go too." So there's 3 girls for the 5 nerds. The proportions seem off, but Girl is not informed about what the plan is. She's told just to go, and the other 2 know the evil plan. A couple of times throughout this movie, Girl has gone up to the manager to talk about things she's seen that just aren't right. Why, when you're planning an illegal trick, would you include the girl with the conscience and not tell her what the plan is? We're going to address this a little bit more later, but this is real dumb. 5 guys and 3 girls. Apparently, that's a party. Poor Lamar mostly keeps to himself, while Lewis just stares at Girl in her bikini, which is, again, real weird, dude. Girl actually reveals herself to be a biology nerd. She knows a lot about biology. She's studying it in college. Okay, so she's a scientist who earlier in the movie did not know how to type on a keyboard for a computer. And by this point in the film, you are 100% supposed to have forgotten about Betty, his actual girlfriend. She is no longer mentioned, referenced, hinted at, nothing. So what was the whole point of the first movie then, if we're just going to throw that out? And it's actually what is the point of this movie, because it comes back in the third, and what happens here is just wiped off the face of the planet. Anyway, the girls send the guys on a beer run, and of course they get arrested for stealing Josh Lyman's car. Lewis is extremely upset about this, because he feels like Girl betrayed him. And he's mad at himself for thinking that a beautiful woman could actually care about him. That a beautiful woman would be nice to him without ulterior motives. And nobody, while he's going on this monologue, feels the need to point out that he's dating the most beautiful girl from his college who loves him. I guess because we are not supposed to remember that anymore. While the Alphas are celebrating their victory, can we talk about Ogre real quick? Now, it's pretty clear that the Alphas barely tolerate Ogre because he's incredibly stupid. I mean, sure, he's good to have around because he's super strong, but he's so stupid it's embarrassing. Josh Lyman is the leader of the Alpha Betas because he has the highest GPA of the bunch, at 2.2, they point out to us. So, they value intelligence and GPA. They're embarrassed by big dumb jocks. Why do they hate nerds again? Just to compress some plot here, new nerd and girl meet up, and by putting together the facts that each of them gathered independently, Girl realizes that the nerds were set up and that she was accidentally a part of this scheme. Which kind of points out how incredibly stupid this entire plan was. Because in order for their fraternity to have the national charter revoked, they have to be found guilty of a crime. Which would involve a trial, which would take months, by which point this conference would be over. During the course of that trial, the 3 girls would be called as witnesses. And even if the 2 of them were willing to perjure themselves, which is what they'd have to do, in order to get a conviction against the nerds to disband the national charter, they'd have to lie under oath. Girl wouldn't do that, because she has proven herself to be a moral character. Even if she was offered money, she would not perjure herself. So there's at least one witness who would get up there and unravel the entire criminal plot, which means there's a better than decent chance that the nerds wouldn't be found guilty, their national charter wouldn't be revoked, and instead, Josh Lyman would get arrested for filing a false police report, and the Alpha Betas would get their national charter revoked. This is an incredibly stupid plan. This does not work. Girl and new nerd go and bail the nerds out of jail, but Lewis decides enough is enough. He's giving up, and everybody's going home. I'm not sure you're allowed to go home because you haven't had the whole trial yet. That'd be leaving the state. Paying bail and dropping the charges are two very different things. Anyway, at that point, the Alphas show up outside the jailhouse and kidnap the nerds. Why? Your original crappy plan isn't even done yet, and it hasn't played out. They're still charged with Grand Theft Auto. Some of you may remember I did the first 2 episodes of the 1966 Batman TV series, and this is kind of reminding me of that. Because in that, the Riddler won. The Riddler framed Batman, and Batman was going to have to testify in a court of law, revealing his identity in the process. The Riddler won. And then after the Riddler set that up, he kidnapped Robin. Which then led to Batman getting his revenge, saving Robin, and uncovering the whole evil plan. If he'd stopped, he'd have won. And that's exactly... They would not have won, but they ruined their own crappy plan by kidnapping, which is another illegal activity, which is another reason their national charter would be revoked. So the Alphas throw the nerds out into the water and onto a desert island. Girl decides to join them voluntarily. See, the Alphas weren't planning to throw her out, because they don't know she's secretly a nerd. Honey? If I can call you honey? Honey, maybe let the Alphas take you back to dry land, and then go to the police. Tell them everything you know, including where the nerds were dropped off, so they can be rescued. Then you foiled all the plots, and the Alpha Betas get arrested, and everybody wins. Now you're just gonna swim out to the island? Okay. Ogre talks about how he can't wait to tell everybody how they tricked the nerds, and the Alphas decide they've had enough of his crap and throw him overboard too. So great. Now they've pissed off 2 people who know about their plans, one of whom was there for every planning session. Good job! Ogre can't swim, so Wormser saves him, and now Ogre is a loyal friend to the nerds, eventually, over the course of this island vacation. At his lowest point, Lewis dreams that best friend comes to him and gives him advice, including telling him that he can't give up on the romance with Girl. And just jumping forward again, in the 3rd movie, Girl is nowhere to be seen. Lewis is married to Betty. What is the point of this romance plot? I've gone on about it enough. I'd be repeating myself. It drives me nuts. You have all of these other characters, all these other ways you could have written it. Why does Lewis have 2 different romance subplots in 2 movies in a row with different women when he's supposed to be the good guy? So, Lewis knows they have to get off the island and back to the convention before tomorrow, when the council will vote to disband their fraternity. Okay, this is our main pressing issue for our 3rd act. The clock is ticking. They have to somehow get to the conference before the vote is passed to disband their national charter based on their illegal activity. They have to show up before that vote is passed so that it can prove themselves innocent. Now, they've only been charged with a crime. They have not been found guilty of a crime. Presumably, even if you could disband their national charter on the basis that they were accused of a crime, and I have a feeling that the other 100 or whatever franchises of the Lambdas would have an issue with having their national charter revoked because one branch was accused of criminal activity. When they were found innocent, which they probably would be, as we covered, surely it would be reinstated. Right? They were found innocent. It would be reinstated. The Alpha Betas would be dismissed. So, even if they can't get to the conference on time, it doesn't matter. But the movie is insistent on making me feel like this is a race against the clock. Don't think, just feel. Alright, so to speed this up, Danny Kincannon and Wormser figure out where the island is on a map by doing some sciencey stuff, and it turns out it's a top-secret island that a Spanish warlord hid a bunch of military equipment that he stole from the U.S. military, and the equipment was never found. Now, ignoring the fact that it was very well known that he stole it and that he put it on this particular island, apparently the U.S. military didn't care enough to ever look for it or retrieve it? New nerd builds a metal detector out of wood, and Danny Kincannon uses it to find the military equipment, which the nerds use to get off the island, which leads us to the nerds driving through 44 miles of ocean on a presumably amphibian tank, bursting through the wall of the conference. Note that either the military equipment included sewing supplies, or there was just a sweet military bikini in the supplies. Anyway, turns out the nerds don't know how to drive a tank, not helped by the fact that Danny Kincannon, the blind person, is the one actually driving, and they accidentally drive through the crowd who get out of the way and through another wall and finally stall out in the pool. So, the nerds have stolen U.S. military equipment, drove it through a public hotel, well, private hotel, terrorizing people, all so that they could explain that they were innocent of stealing a car so that their charter wouldn't be revoked. Okay. Great. You even brought witnesses that said you didn't steal a car, so you're in the clear, right? Except for the hundreds of people who just saw you drive through a building with a tank and almost kill people. Now you are guilty of crimes. Girl calls out Josh Lyman for setting them up, and he instantly capitulates. Yep, did it. That was the plan. That's what we did. What are you going to do about it? Well, have your national charter revoked for moral turpitude, because that's the amendment you put in the books, and you just confessed that you did illegal stuff for nefarious purposes. So, yeah. Nope, none of that happens. By the way, I've mentioned several times about revoking the Alpha Beta's national charter. That never happens. Lewis punches the guy into the pool, kisses the girl, wins the day. Luckily, Josh Lyman doesn't even think about suing Lewis for assault, because again, that would have been an illegal activity that would have revoked the national charter. None of that happens. This is our end. The consequence for his actions is getting punched and landing in a pool. None of this stuff about illegal activities and revoking charter, none of it happens. Because we weren't supposed to think any deeper than the movie told us. The nerds said, we gotta show up at this time to prove our innocence and everything will be okay, and then they did that. Doesn't matter that they committed crimes getting there. And it doesn't matter that they could easily turn this back around on the villain who committed crimes. No. But this isn't the end. There is one more scene. We end by making Ogre an official nerd. The end. This movie sucks. There's your movie. It's real bad. The first Revenge of the Nerds has problems because of its age now. But this entire movie sucks. It's supposed to be a movie about smart people. Because they're nerds, and they're supposed to be smart. No. Nobody ever sits down and thinks or plans. The only plotting is done by the bad guys who get in their own way, which is fair, because they're not supposed to be that smart, even though they value intelligence. I'm not going to talk about the romance subplot and how stupid that is again. I feel like I've done that enough. This movie's not fun. I showed you the one good line. I showed you the one good cameo. And then, the fact that Joshua Lyman's in it's entertaining. Not because he's entertaining in it, because nobody's entertaining in this movie. But it's, fun to know that he was in it. And if you see him on the street, you should always, always greet him with, "Hey, I loved you in Revenge of the Nerds 2, Nerds in Paradise." So, I'm done. Just done. I certainly hope the next movie I review doesn't revolve around a man sleeping with a woman while pretending to be somebody else. That would be weird. Hey guys, different shirt, same quarantine beard. As I was putting together the footage for this episode, 3 things jumped out at me that I felt a need to point out. During the course of the movie, when New Nerd is thrown out of the hotel, Lewis, instantly and off the cuff, makes a baseball reference. Safe! When they're partying with the girls, they are eager to go and get alcohol, and they buy all the alcohol, and they're very excited about it. These nerds had a valid plan for how to throw a rager, and it worked. And the final climax of the movie, our heroes save the day by punching out a jock. The denouement of the film is a physical conflict. These are our nerds. Our sports referencing, beer chugging, punching out people nerds. I just felt a need to point that out. I'll see you guys in the next movie. That was a lot to share. Okay.